Medieval peasants faced the same bug problems we do today, but without the tools we rely on. They came up with simple, clever ways to get rid of bed bugs and cockroaches. Here are 10 easy methods they used to keep their homes bug-free. One of the first tricks they turned to involved is something easy to find and even easier to use: herbs. Burning sweet-smelling herbs wasn't just about making the air smell pleasant. It became a powerful way to drive away the pests that shared their homes. The most popular herbs for bug fighting included rosemary, thyme, mint, and sage. These weren't exotic plants that needed to be traded for or bought at market. Peasants could gather them from nearby fields or grow them in small garden patches right outside their humble homes. Unlike today, where we might buy dried herbs in neat little jars, medieval folk would collect bunches of these plants and hang them to dry from their ceiling beams, creating what must have looked like little green upside-down forests dangling throughout their homes. Once the herbs were properly dried, which made them burn better and smoke more, peasants would toss handfuls into their fireplaces or place them in simple clay pots with hot coals. The smoke that filled the house wasn't just any smoke. It contained natural compounds that bugs absolutely hated. If bed bugs could talk, they'd probably say these herbs were the medieval equivalent of your mother-in-law showing up unannounced for an extended stay. This herb-burning ritual became especially important during damp seasons when bug populations exploded. The strong-smelling smoke would work its way into every crack and crevice of their homes, up into thatched roofs, through wooden beam gaps, and into the straw-stuffed mattresses where bed bugs loved to hide. Medieval people also believed these fragrant clouds did double duty by purifying the air and keeping disease at bay. While they didn't understand germ theory, they weren't entirely wrong. Many of these herbs do have antimicrobial properties. Turns out our ancestors weren't just bug-fighting geniuses, they were accidental health experts too. And here we are today thinking we're smart because we can order pizza from our phones. After filling their homes with herb smoke, medieval peasants would often follow up by their next important step in their pest-fighting routine. Taking your blankets, pillows, and straw mattresses outside for a sunny day treatment was a brilliant bug-fighting strategy medieval peasants used regularly. This wasn't just spring cleaning, it was war against the tiny invaders who made sleep miserable. The process started early in the morning when mothers and daughters would drag every bit of bedding outside the cottage. Straw mattresses, woolen blankets, and cloth-covered pillows stuffed with whatever soft materials the family could afford were all laid out under the open sky. The direct sunlight did what no indoor treatment could. It heated everything to temperatures that made bugs scramble for their lives. Medieval people didn't know about ultraviolet radiation, but they knew the sun could cook a bug faster than you can say medieval exterminator. The heat from direct sunlight would drive bed bugs from their hiding spots within the bedding materials, while also killing many of their eggs. Did you know that bed bugs can lay up to 5 eggs every day? In just 2 months, one female bed bug could have over 300 descendants. No wonder medieval folk were so determined to get those pests out. But the sun treatment was just half the battle. Once the bedding had baked for hours, family members would pick up sturdy sticks and beat every inch of those blankets and mattresses with surprising vigor. Each whack sent clouds of dust flying, along with any stubborn bugs still clinging to life inside. The louder the thwack, the more satisfying the bug murder. It was the medieval version of stress relief therapy, just with more dead insects as a bonus. This beating process wasn't gentle. Children would often join in, turning pest control into a family activity that happened weekly throughout warm months. The ground beneath would be left with a disturbing collection of bugs, dust, and debris that was quickly swept away or left for chickens to feast upon. While the bedding aired out, the sleeping areas inside got a thorough sweeping. Floors were cleaned of any fallen bugs or eggs that might have dropped during the night. After the sun started to set, everything would be brought back inside, smelling fresh and considerably less populated with unwanted roommates. With their bedding now bug-free, medieval peasants turned their attention to another clever trick involving something they always had plenty of. Fireplace ashes weren't just waste material in medieval times. They were secret weapons in the battle against household pests. Who needs fancy pest control when you've got last night's fire leftovers? Every morning after stoking the fire, smart peasants would collect the fine, powdery ash and put it to work against their 6-legged enemies. Handfuls of the gray powder were sprinkled in strategic locations, around bed legs to create protective circles, along wall edges where bugs traveled, and in corners of food storage areas. It was like creating tiny moats around their beds, except instead of water with alligators, they had ash with, more ash. The ash wasn't scattered randomly. Medieval people targeted the pathways bugs preferred. What made ash so effective? The tiny particles had sharp, jagged edges too small for human fingers to feel, but devastating to insects. When bugs tried to cross an ash barrier, these microscopic edges would cut into their exoskeletons. You might say the bugs went from living their best life to rest in peace the moment they decided to take a shortcut across an ash line. For soft-bodied pests like bedbugs, the ash would absorb the oils from their bodies, essentially dehydrating them to death. The downside? Ash barriers needed constant maintenance. A draft from an open door or a mischievous cat could disturb the powder. Medieval pest control, defeated by a sneeze, a stumble, or a feline with an attitude problem. This meant households regularly touched up their ash lines, especially before bedtime when bugs came out to feast. Some clever households mixed crushed herbs into their ash. Dried mint, wormwood, or tansy created a double defense system, physical damage plus chemical repellents. Studies show certain types of fine ash can kill up to 80% of bedbugs exposed to it for just 24 hours. Medieval peasants were basically pest control scientists without the lab coats, just a whole lot more dirt under their fingernails. After surrounding their sleeping areas with protective ash barriers, medieval peasants turned next to their kitchens to create another potent bug-fighting weapon. The strong-smelling garlic water that medieval peasants brewed up might have kept away more than just vampires. It was their go-to liquid weapon against creepy crawlies in the home. Before modern bug sprays came along, this pungent potion was what kept many a medieval family from being eaten alive in their sleep. Creating this bug-fighting brew wasn't complicated. Fresh garlic cloves were crushed or chopped and tossed into a bucket of water. The mixture would sit overnight, allowing the water to extract all those potent sulfur compounds. By morning, the liquid smelled strong enough to make your eyes water from across the room. Medieval peasants probably knew they had a good batch when even the family dog refused to come indoors. The garlic water was splashed liberally around problem areas: bed frames, floorboards, food storage areas, and dark corners where bugs like to hide. As the water dried, it left behind an invisible barrier of garlic oils that continued working long after the liquid evaporated. Garlic contains a compound called allicin that forms when the cloves are crushed. This compound gives garlic its potent smell and acts as a natural insecticide. Bedbugs and cockroaches have sensitive respiratory systems and are overwhelmed by these strong-smelling compounds. A typical garlic clove can contain enough allicin to repel insects from a several-foot radius. Many households added their own special touches to the basic formula. Some mixed in vinegar or leftover wine, making the solution stick better to surfaces while adding even more offensive odors. Others would save the crushed garlic pieces after straining and place these soggy bits in corners or underbeds for extra protection. The downside? Everything and everyone smelled like garlic. Medieval dating must have been challenging when both you and your potential sweetheart reeked of garlic water, though it certainly ensured you both had equally bad breath, which was probably considered thoughtful. Fresh batches needed to be made every few days as the potency faded. But considering the alternative, being dinner for hundreds of tiny bloodsuckers, the smell seemed a small price to pay. When garlic water alone wasn't enough to tackle a serious infestation, medieval families turned to another method. Beer and ale weren't just for drinking in medieval times. These fermented beverages doubled as effective pest control when they went flat or sour. Leftover beer from the night before became tomorrow's bug trap in the resourceful medieval household, proving that even in the Middle Ages, nothing went to waste. The technique couldn't have been simpler. Small amounts of stale beer or ale were poured into shallow clay dishes, which were then placed in strategic locations throughout the home. Popular spots included near the hearth where it was warm, in dark corners where bugs liked to gather, and even under bedding where those nighttime biters lurked. What made these beer traps so effective? The scent of fermentation, that yeasty, slightly sweet smell that comes from beer, acted like a powerful attractant to many household pests. Cockroaches in particular found the aroma irresistible, drawn by the sugars and yeasts in the brew. The bugs must have thought they'd hit the medieval jackpot. Finally invited to a beer party, only to discover it was their own funeral. As the unsuspecting bugs approached and attempted to drink from the tempting liquid, they would fall in and drown, unable to escape the sticky beverage. By morning, the trap would often contain dozens of drowned insects floating in their last drink. Some clever households enhanced these traps by adding small crumbs of bread, bits of cheese, or tiny scraps of meat to make the lure even more enticing. The combination of food and fermented beverage proved nearly impossible for cockroaches to resist. Medieval peasants didn't have bachelor parties, but they did have six-legged drinking contests where all the contestants lost. The traps would be emptied each morning, with the bug-filled brew usually fed to chickens or pigs, ensuring that even dead pests became useful as part of the food chain. After setting their beer traps at night, medieval households would often enhance their pest defenses further by scattering certain powerful-smelling plants around their living spaces. Tanzy and wormwood plants became medieval pest control superheroes long before commercial insect repellents existed. These two powerful herbs were the medieval equivalent of bug kryptonite, causing insects to flee from wherever they were placed. Tanzy, with its bright yellow button-like flowers, contains a natural compound called thujone that bugs find absolutely repulsive. Medieval households would harvest tansy when it was in full bloom, then dry the stems and leaves before putting them to work. Some crushed the dried leaves into a coarse powder, while others kept the plant mostly intact in small bundles. Wormwood brought even more bug-fighting power with its intensely bitter smell. This silvery gray plant was especially effective against fleas and bedbugs. If bugs held town meetings, wormwood would be discussed in hushed tones as the plant equivalent of a haunted house, something to be avoided at all costs. The application was straightforward but strategic. Dried tansy and wormwood were placed anywhere bugs might try to establish themselves, under mattresses, along windowsills, and around food storage areas. Some homemakers would stuff small cloth pouches with the herbs and tuck them into corners of sleeping areas. Medieval people noticed that tansy worked especially well when placed in bed straw. The pressure of a person sleeping on the mattress would help release more of the plant's oils throughout the night. Meanwhile, wormwood was often boiled into a strong tea and used to wipe down walls and furniture, leaving behind a residue that continued working after it dried. What made this method valuable was its longevity. A good bundle could remain effective for several weeks before needing replacement. Many families grew these plants near their homes, ensuring a ready supply throughout the growing season. The downside? Medieval homes smelled like a bizarre combination of bitter herbs, which probably explained why village gatherings happened outdoors whenever possible. But the trade-off was worth it. Fewer bugs meant less disease and better sleep, while scattering herbs around the house kept many bugs at bay. Some medieval households took their pest control to the next level by enlisting the help of feathered allies. Chickens might seem like unlikely heroes in the battle against bugs, but medieval households often allowed these feathered pest controllers to roam indoors. Long before specialized pesticides existed, chickens served as living vacuum cleaners, happily gobbling up any insect unfortunate enough to cross their path. Early morning was typically chicken patrol time. The birds would be let into the house after spending the night in their coop and permitted to wander around floors, pecking at cracks between floorboards and along wall edges. A single chicken can eat up to 70 insects per day, making them incredibly efficient bug hunters. They were particularly effective against cockroaches, which would try to scramble away only to become a tasty breakfast for these birds. The kitchen and food storage areas received special attention from the chickens. These spaces naturally attracted more pests due to food crumbs and scraps, making them prime hunting grounds. The medieval version of chicken dinner often meant the chicken was having dinner, not becoming it. Some households went a step further during serious infestations. They would create temporary indoor spaces where hens could stay overnight, strategically placing them near heavily infested areas like beneath beds or in corners where bedbugs gathered. The chicken method had several advantages over other pest control techniques. Unlike herbs that merely repelled insects or traps that needed constant maintenance, chickens actively sought out and eliminated bugs. They could reach places humans couldn't easily access, such as deep cracks in the floor or high wall crevices. Of course, having livestock roaming through your living space did come with certain drawbacks. Medieval homes already had enough unpleasant smells without adding chicken droppings to the mix. This was organic pest control with very organic side effects. Regular sweeping and cleaning became essential after the chickens had completed their bug patrol. While chickens helped control the bug population, medieval people also worked on making their homes less hospitable to pests by tackling a fundamental problem in their dwellings. Filling cracks and gaps became an essential pest control strategy in medieval homes where bugs could easily find hiding spots in the rough building materials. Unlike today's sealed houses, medieval dwellings were full of tiny spaces where unwelcome guests could set up colonies and launch midnight raids on sleeping humans. The floors presented the first challenge. Most peasant homes had simple packed earth or rough wooden plank floors with plenty of gaps between boards. Medieval families would stuff these cracks with whatever materials they had available: straw mixed with clay, strips of cloth from worn-out clothing, or even dried moss collected from the forest. Walls required even more attention, especially those made with wattle and daub construction, a framework of interwoven sticks plastered with a mixture of clay, animal dung, and straw. This building method was basically creating a bug condominium complex unless regularly maintained. As this material aged and dried, it would crack and shrink, creating perfect hideaways for everything from spiders to bed bugs. Patching these areas became a regular seasonal task. After heavy rains or during spring cleaning, new batches of clay, mud, or dung mixtures would be prepared and spread over any cracks that had developed. The job often fell to women and children who would press the material firmly into spaces where bugs had been spotted. The gap between walls and roofing was especially problematic. Bugs often nested in these shadowy transition areas, hidden from view but with easy access to sleeping humans below. Families would use strips of fabric, wads of straw, or even aromatic herbs to fill these spaces, creating barriers against the pests. Some clever households mixed bug-repelling ingredients into their repair materials. Crushed garlic, strong vinegar, or bitter herbs added to clay patches made the repairs not just physical barriers, but chemical deterrents as well. When medieval homeowners complained about cracks in their home security system, they weren't worried about thieves. They were concerned about the six-legged invaders that could find their way in through the tiniest openings. After sealing up all the entry points and hiding spots, many medieval households added another layer of protection. Fresh herbs like lavender, rue, and sage tied in bundles and strategically placed around the home created a network of bug-repelling booby traps that medieval households relied on for continuous protection. Think of these arrangements as the medieval version of air fresheners, except instead of just making the place smell nice, they helped ensure you wouldn't wake up covered in itchy bites. Creating these herbal traps started with gathering the right plants. Lavender, with its pleasant but potent smell, was a favorite, as were the more bitter-smelling herbs like rue and sage. These plants contain natural oils that disrupt insect nervous systems or mask the scents that attract them to human hosts. Once collected, the herbs were tied into tight bundles using thin strips of cloth or plant fibers. These bundles were then hung from ceiling beams, draped over bedposts, or attached to pantry doors, all the places where bug traffic was highest. Medieval homes must have looked like strange garden shops with these herbal arrangements dangling everywhere, the original home decor that doubled as pest control. The sleeping area received special attention in this system. Beyond hanging bundles around the bed, many families stuffed lavender, mint, or tansy directly into pillowcases or mattress stuffing. This provided an extra layer of protection during vulnerable sleeping hours when bed bugs were most active. Rue deserves special mention in the medieval bug-fighting arsenal. This strongly aromatic herb was particularly feared by fleas and was often placed near doorways and windows, the main entry points for many insects. Rue was basically the medieval equivalent of a nightclub bouncer, keeping out all the unwanted guests before they could cause trouble. Replacing these herb bundles became part of the weekly home maintenance routine, with each family developing their own preferred combinations and placement strategies over time. When herbal bundles alone couldn't conquer a severe infestation, medieval households turned to the most thorough pest-killing method they had available. The clothes, sheets, and blankets that medieval peasants boiled in large iron pots might have been the most direct and effective bug-killing method in their entire pest control arsenal. When all else failed, boiling water became the nuclear option against stubborn infestations. No bug could survive the rolling, bubbling water that killed both adult insects and their eggs with brutal efficiency. Medieval households kept a designated bug boiling pot, usually a large iron cauldron suspended over the central hearth fire. Water would be brought to a vigorous boil before adding the infested items, which would then bubble away for at least several minutes. You can almost hear the tiny bug screams as they met their steamy doom. If bugs could scream, which thankfully they can't, or medieval peasants would never have gotten any sleep. The heat from boiling didn't just kill visible bugs, it was especially effective against the hidden eggs that other methods often missed. Bedbug eggs are remarkably resilient and can survive many traditional treatments, but they cannot withstand temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit for more than a few minutes. Boiling water reaches 212 degrees, making it overkill in the best possible way. Many medieval families enhanced their boiling technique by adding salt, vinegar, or both to the water. While the heat alone was sufficient to kill the bugs, these additives were believed to add extra cleaning power and ensure nothing survived. Wooden furniture legs and bed frames couldn't go into the pot but still needed treatment. For these, families would dip rags into the still hot water and carefully wipe down every surface, paying special attention to cracks and corners where bugs might hide. Medieval pest control was basically a hot water spa treatment, except instead of relaxation, the goal was bug genocide. After boiling, items would be hung outside in direct sunlight to dry, combining two pest control methods for extra effectiveness. This intensive process was typically reserved for serious infestations or performed as part of spring cleaning. From burning herbs to boiling fabrics, medieval peasants used nature's resources and everyday items to keep those pesky bugs at bay.